Welcome to Mediocre Gaming, and today we're playing Marvel Avengers. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and salutations. Today, the Unyielding Beam. Let's get to it. So this is a build video for Iron Man. One of the nice things about it is that you do not need to have a exotic piece of gear in order to make this work. You can just use regular legendary gear as long as it has the right perks on it. If it has the right characteristics or attributes, even better. But we're going to go over it step by step, and we're going to start off with the skills page. Now, the primary skill page will be the same for everyone, and also this build also revolves around lasers. So we're going to talk about the lasers. So you should minimally have specialty and mastery filled out, plus the lasers filled out on the primary page. Now, just looking at the laser skills, you'll notice that there are regular and also power attack laser skills. So moving on the specialty tab, you'll want to look especially at the support heroic ability, have all of that unlocked, and have the arc field and defensive field both selected. One will give you a bubble that bullets can fly out of, but not can fly into it. So no projectiles in, but only projectiles out. The other one will bounce back the projectiles. Now you don't necessarily have to have that, but it will be useful. And then the assault and ultimate can be spec'd out to whatever you would like. This build does not require a specific specialization for the assault or ultimate. Moving on to the mastery tab, you'll want to have arc reactor generator, which will increase your base regen of intrinsic skill, perfect evade intrinsic boost. It'll instantly give you 15 points of intrinsic energy from a perfect evade. And then overcharge heroic boost, which will boost the recharge rate of your heroics abilities, all of them, when you are overcharged. Basically, we're looking at trying to boost up your intrinsic energy as quickly as possible and get your heroic abilities back quickly as well. So if there is a specialization in that intrinsic tree that would better suit your play style, certainly choose that, but this is what I chose. Make sure that you have air superiority checked off, which will increase the damage of your ranged attacks while flying by 15%. Now, the difference between hovering and flying is that flying, you're moving forward, whereas hovering, you're not. So that does make a difference. So if you're just hovering in the air, aiming at different guys, that's not the same as flying. Now, moving on to ranged. Now, I have to say that initially, the repulsors are kind of the iconic Iron Man tool for ranged attacks. And after playing with them for a while, then I really liked the rockets. I really enjoyed playing with the rockets, both the single fire and then the smart rockets. I enjoyed both of those and I used those a lot. However, since this build revolves around lasers, we're going to use the laser specializations. So laser efficiency, which will decrease your energy drain, your intrinsic drain when using lasers. Laser specialization, which will reduce the intrinsic energy cost of using aimed fire for laser weapon by 10%. And laser mastery, which will increase the stun damage by 20%. Now, the difference between laser efficiency and laser specialization only includes the times when you're aiming with the laser and then firing versus any laser attack. And then moving over to combat, ranged combat mastery, which will increase all ranged attack damage by 15%. And lastly, we're going to have stun mastery, which increases all stun damage dealt to enemies by 15%. Now, I believe that only includes melee attacks, but between lasers and melees, this will help you get the enemy to a stun state. All right, now looking at gear. First of all, we're going to look at the major artifact. We'll be using the Sacred Norn Stone of Lethal Will, which has 5.7% increased critical chance when the damage boost is active, increased duration of all damage buffs by 4 seconds, and then use both triggers to activate a damage boost. So increase your critical chance when there's a damage boost and increase duration of all damage buffs by 4 seconds. Next we have minor artifacts, Norn's Stone of Conquest, which grants 5.7 chance of completing any mission at challenge 2 or above, will award extra gear item, and 4.5% increased crit chance for a light combo finisher. Now, although this is not the ideal artifact to have in this slot, it does have good stats on it. So if I had one to choose from, I would go with one that increases crit chance for ranged attacks and increased recharge rate for support abilities. Next, we have 50% reduction in heroic energy drain and 25% less damage from spin attacks. Very annoying since they drain all your heroics. Has nice stats on it as well. And what we really want, or why I'm really using it, 5.0% increased crit chance for power attacks. Now in the melee gear slot, we have the lightweight protection gauntlets, which give 40.9% chance light combo finishers grant a defense buff. Light combo finishers trigger a burst of cryo damage and 15% increased critical hit chance from all weapons. And once again, we have a decent stat roll on there. In the range gear, we have Adept Buff Repulsor, which gives 54.6 chance hitting an enemy with a ranged critical attack, grants a damage buff, which is very important for this build. Plasma Diode, laser attacks deal plasma damage. And Expert Buff, 80.7% chance defeating an enemy with a ranged critical grants a damage buff. So we have two possibilities of getting a damage buff from ranged criticals, either from a ranged critical or from defeating an enemy with a ranged critical. And of course, the laser attacks that do plasma damage. When enemies have enough plasma damage, their attacks will be interrupted and they will take a little bit of damage. Not as much damage as if it was gamma damage instead of plasma, but you really want this for the preventing them from attacking. Now, you could also use one that has cryo damage on it as well. I don't recommend PIM particles, and gamma damage is okay, but it's not great. Now, for defense gear, we have the Reflexive Spark Plating, which gives 17% chance parrying incoming attacks, grant a heroic charge burst for all heroics. Courageous Inspiration grants a willpower burst when critically injured, and damage taken is reduced to 86.5% of normal when critically injured. Now, the perks on the defense piece is not critical, although the perks and stats that you have on it will certainly help you or hinder you while you're playing. And lastly, we're looking at the heroic gear, which is the Mighty Blessing Reactor. 11.5% chance increased critical hit chance for power attacks, 29.6% chance takedowns grant a damage buff, and Berserker Inspiration successfully land 16 hits in rapid succession without taking any damage to grant a willpower burst. Now that's a whole lot of information all at once, and we're going to pile some more information on top of that. For stats, we have Might of 69, which will increase the melee damage, Precision at 35, which increases range damage, Proficiency at 45, which increases crit chance and perk chance, Valor at 97, which affects your heroic effectiveness and crit damage. Heroic effectiveness is basically the damage or healing or whatever tied to your heroic abilities. Resolve at 154, which will increase your max health or willpower, and your willpower recovery effectiveness will be higher as well. Recovery effectiveness is like when you pick up a regen pack, how much health do you get from each of those? Resilience 206. That's increased armor. So if there's 100 points of damage and you have armor at 40%, instead of taking 100 points of damage, you're only going to take 60 points of damage. And then of course that scales with the damage. So if they do 10,000 points of damage, you're not going to take 10,000, you're going to take 40% less. Intensity, your status and stun meter damage will increase, and status resistance is increased as well. So now we're going to put all of this together. Now there are no stats that affect your heroic charge rates. You have to have something that specifically calls to one of those charge rates or all of those charge rates. Now, as a side note, Currently, as things stand, and for the foreseeable future, resolve and resilience are necessary to be at least at a minimum, I would say, of 90 or above, simply because you cannot have a glass cannon. So, for example, I had a Hulk build that had 235 in might, which increased your melee damage by a decent chunk. But he only had like 30, 35 in resolve and resilience a piece. So, very little max willpower, around 10 to 12,000, and armor was like 18%. So he did a decent amount of damage, but he does a decent amount of melee damage anyway, and he could only take a few attacks at level. So a level or mission that was at the same level that he was at, he would take 2, 3, maybe 4. So somewhere between 2 and 4 hits before he would go down. So it was very frustrating to try to play a build like that versus something that has more beefy stats, more resolve, more resilience. So I would say a minimum of 90. Now, in a perfect world, I would like to bump up that precision a little bit, maybe by 30 or even 60, and drop the resilience as a result. Additionally, maybe beef up proficiency a little bit as well. But this works pretty well. So you're not just looking for perks, you're also looking for attributes on the different pieces of gear, both artifacts and, of course, your armor. Now, putting this all together, we have the increased base regen of our intrinsic. We have extra damage of laser attacks and aimed laser attacks, as well as additional stun damage from doing laser attacks. The major artifact gives us a increased time window for damage buffs. We have that 5% increased crit chance for power attacks on the prismatic ISO 8. We have the 15% increased crit chance from all weapons on the lightweight protection gauntlets. We have plasma damage from laser attacks on the adept buff repulsors, as well as the chance of getting a damage buff from a ranged critical attack or a ranged critical defeat. So 2 different times that you can get a damage buff, both from ranged criticals. We have another 11.5% increased crit chance for power attacks on the Mighty Blessing Reactor, as well as Berserker Inspiration, which gives you a willpower burst by landing 16 hits in rapid succession. Now add to that an extra 14.2% crit chance on all attacks, plus an extra 13.7% perk chance, with the heroic effectiveness of 1184 and an extra 199% crit damage. Roll that all together, and you have laser attacks that not only do plasma damage and stun damage, but also, after you've been aiming and holding that laser attack for 1 to 2 seconds, it turns into a ranged power attack, which has increased crit chance from those perks and a chance of getting a damage buff. And of course, when you get that damage buff, you will have that damage buff for longer because of the major artifact. And every time you get 1 tick of damage from the laser, which comes very quickly, after 16 of those, you will get a willpower burst. And because the resolve is higher, the willpower recovery is more effective, you'll get more willpower from that burst. So putting it all together, you have a laser weapon that does a tremendous amount of damage. Holding down the fire button will turn it into a power attack, which will increase the crit chance. And not only does it do extra damage because of the critical hits, but you are also doing more damage because of the plasma status that you're doing. So in short, you have a tanky Iron Man that also does DPS at range with those plasma lasers, and very difficult to take out, both with that resolve and resiliency, and as well as that Berserker Inspiration, which gives you that willpower burst, and you have that support ability, that Arc Overload, which will overcharge your intrinsic energy, and that in turn will increase your heroic charge, so you'll get your heroics back even faster because you're overcharged. And while you're overcharged, you can just lay into any enemy with those lasers as long as that's active. All right, so enough talking about it. Let's see it all in action. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to check us out on social media, and thank you for liking, commenting, and subscribing. And we'll see you next time.
Was on fire. Did we expect everything to be on fire?
I don't think so.
Good, good.
Hey, watchdogs, you looking for us?
Capture the Avengers.
I don't think so.
You want to protect these monsters? You can die like one!
There's a chest with gear close by.
You're a disgrace! No one else falls! You got it?
Good night.
Stand up and fight! Forget the weak!
Good night.
Hey, nice, sweetheart!
An impressive and educational performance. Excellent work.